Hey everyone, and welcome to DuoBlocks edX. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the magic that powers, well, pretty much every app and website you use. We are talking about back-end development. And I promise, by the end of this, you're going to have a super clear map of what it is, why it's so important, and yeah, how it all clicks together.
So let's just jump right in. Have you ever, clicked place order on some website or maybe hit send on an email and just paused for a second and thought, wait, what? What just happened? Where did that go? That invisible, kind of magical process that takes what you did, works some magic behind the screen, and then shows you a result, that is exactly what we're talking about today. That's the world of back-end development.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First up, we'll talk about this invisible engine. Then we'll get into the tools of the trade, the languages and frameworks. After that, we'll look at the messengers, also known as APIs, and finally, the digital library, which is just a cool way of saying databases. We're going to break it all down, piece by piece.
All right, first up, the invisible engine. Let's tackle that big question right away. What exactly is back-end development?
In the simplest terms, back-end development is all the stuff you don't see. It's the server side of things. We're talking about the actual server, all of the application's logic, the database, all of it working together completely behind the scenes to handle, well, everything, from processing that online order to just letting you log in. And a couple of analogies really help this click. Think about a restaurant. You see the dining room, right? The tables, the waiters, but the real work, the cooking, that's all happening back in the kitchen. Or think about a car. You're interacting with the steering wheel and the pedals, but it's the engine under the hood that's actually making the whole thing go. The backend is exactly that. It's that hidden but absolutely essential powerhouse.
So this really shows you the two sides of the same coin. You've got the front end, that's everything you see and touch, the buttons, the text, the images, the whole user interface. And then you have the back end, which is kind of like the brains of the whole operation. It's dealing with all the data, the security, the real logic. They use totally different tools, but for any good app to work, they have to be in perfect sync. So how do these two sides actually talk to each other? Well, it all happens through something called the request-response cycle. Let's walk through it. Step 1. You click a button on a website. That action sends a request from your browser. Step 2. The backend server catches that request and says, okay, I know what to do with this. Step 3. It might need to grab some info from a database or maybe save something new. And finally, step 4. The backend puts together a response and sends it all the way back to your browser, which then updates what you see on your screen. And this little dance? It happens literally every single time you do anything on a website.
Okay, so how is all of this backend magic actually built? That's a perfect lead-in to our next section, the Builder's Toolkit, where we're going to talk about languages and frameworks.
Now, you could technically build a backend with just a raw programming language, but man, writing everything from scratch would take forever. And that is exactly why we have frameworks. The best way to think of a framework is like a starter kit for a developer. It's this whole collection of code and tools that are already written for you, and it handles all the common boring stuff so you can build your app way faster and a lot more securely.
I love this quote because it just nails it. The programming language, that's your raw material, like wood and steel. The framework, those are your power tools and your blueprints that make construction go way, way faster. It gives you a structure so you can focus on the cool, unique parts of your app instead of reinventing the wheel on all the basic plumbing. Okay, let's look at some of the heavy hitters. You've got Python with frameworks like Django and Flask. These are absolute beasts for data-heavy apps and getting things built quickly. Then there's JavaScript. With Node.js, you can actually use JavaScript on the back end, which is awesome for full-stack developers. Frameworks like Express are amazing for real-time applications. Now, if you're building something huge, like for a big corporation that needs to be super stable, Java with Spring Boot is a classic choice. Don't forget PHP. With a modern framework like Laravel, it still powers a massive chunk of the internet. And finally, there's Go, or Golang. This one is all about speed and performance. It's perfect for building services that have to be lightning fast.
All right, so we've got our tools, but how do different apps and services talk to each other? Well, that brings us to the messengers of the digital world, APIs.
So what on earth is an API? Well, it stands for Application Programming Interface. But honestly, just think of it as a set of rules for how different pieces of software can communicate. The restaurant waiter analogy is perfect here. You don't just walk into the kitchen and start cooking, right? No! You give your order, that's your request, to the waiter. The waiter takes it to the kitchen, that's the back end, and then brings your food back out, that's the response. The API is the waiter. It's that critical go-between.
And, just like there are different kinds of waiters in restaurants, there are different styles of APIs. REST is by far the most popular. It's pretty much the backbone of the modern web. Then you have GraphQL, which is really cool because it lets the app ask for exactly the data it needs, no more, no less. gRPC is a super high-performance one from Google, great for services that need to talk to each other really fast. And then there's SOAP, which is a bit more old school and super structured. You'll see it a lot in big enterprise companies.
Okay, so we've got the engine, we've got the messengers, but where does all the information actually live? That's where our digital library comes in. Let's talk about databases. A database, at its core, is just a super organized collection of data. It's basically the application's long-term memory. Think about it. Every single piece of information, from your user profile on a shopping site, to all your past orders, to every single post you've ever seen on social media, all of that is neatly stored and managed inside a database. But here's the thing, not all databases are the same. They generally fall into two big buckets. You have SQL databases, which are like super organized spreadsheets. Everything is in neat tables with rows and columns, very structured. Then you have NoSQL databases. These are way more flexible. They can store data in all sorts of different formats, which makes them perfect for handling huge amounts of messy, unstructured data.
Whew, okay. We've covered the engine, the toolkit, the messengers, and the library. Let's tie this all together now and make sure the big ideas stick.
So let's do a quick recap. The back end, that's the invisible engine that makes our apps go. How's it built? With programming languages, and we make it go faster using frameworks. How does it talk to everything else? Through those messengers we called APIs. And where does it keep all its information? In databases, our digital libraries, whether they're structured SQL types or the more flexible NoSQL kind. And there you have it. That's our grand tour of the back end. We've seen all the fundamental pieces and how they all connect. So really, there's only one question left to ask. Now that you know all the building blocks, what part of the back end are you going to build first? Hey, if this helped demystify the back end for you, please make sure you subscribe to Duo Blocks edX. Our whole goal here is to break down complicated tech topics into lessons that are easy to get, just like this one. Thanks so much for watching and happy building.